My son's fiancée called me a local homeless person, so I revealed the whole truth. Summit Café and bar glowed like it was auditioning for a magazine. Edison bulbs, chalkboard heart, truffle omelets for 27 bucks. I set my Starbucks on the table and waited. My son, Evan, slid into the booth with his fiancée and her parents, all teeth and perfume. Victor lifted his mimosa. Walter Brooks, public service sweet story, real power's private sector. Elaine's smile pinched. We'll help Evan. Polish. Sophia didn't look up from her phone. Firefighting is, dramatic, not sophisticated. I said nothing. Sipped. Counted to 5. Then she glanced at my jacket. If he wears that to the wedding, people will think we sponsor the local bum. Evan flinched. Sophia. Victor chuckled. Optics, son. Dad, Evan said small. Maybe sit out the big photos? They're going for a look. I felt the room tilt. My coffee didn't spill. Copy, I said. Sophia smirked. Good. Let's keep the homeless vibe outside. I smiled back. I guess 99% of you will hear this. Sigh and scroll past, not clicking like or subscribe. Even if it only takes a second. What time is it for you? And where are you listening? Summit Café and Bar was the kind of place that tried too hard to look effortless. Edison bulbs, distressed brick, every table topped with a small succulent that looked too perfect to be real. The chalkboard behind the counter read truffle omelets, $27, with a crooked little heart someone had drawn beside it, probably trying to make the price feel friendlier. It didn't work. I arrived early. Fire captains always do. Being early isn't courtesy, it's control. The morning crowd buzzed low, half laptop screens, half quiet brunchers pretending they had nowhere else to be. I set my Starbucks Pike Place on the table and watched the condensation ring widen until it vanished. When Evan waved from the corner booth, I could already tell he'd been sitting there long enough to regret inviting me. White shirt, sleeves rolled once too carefully. Sophia sat beside him, beautiful, in the cold way. A showroom car is beautiful. Her parents, Victor and Elaine, radiated the quiet arrogance of people who think grace is a form of property. Victor rose halfway to shake my hand. Walter Brooks, he said, voice like a warm knife. Finally meet the man behind the stories. Public service admirable. But you know strategy. That's where the private sector shines. He said it like he was giving me permission to exist. Sophia smiled faintly, checking her iPhone without looking at me. Firefighting is dramatic, she said, but not exactly sophisticated. I sipped my coffee. You like dramatic? I like results, she replied. Elaine's eyes lingered on my Omega watch, Ruth's last gift to me before moving to my jacket. Clean, plain, functional. She smiled with pity, the kind you give a stray dog before shutting the door. Evan shifted beside her, his thumb tapping against his glass, his tell since childhood. I could almost see the thoughts running behind his eyes, the math between love and approval. Victor picked up his mimosa again. Evan tells us you're retired now. That must feel strange. All that adrenaline, then suddenly nothing. I smiled. You'd be surprised what fills the silence. Sophia laughed softly, manicured fingers tracing the rim of her glass. You don't have to act modest, Mr. Brooks. You've had your chapter. Evan and I are just writing the next one. The waitress appeared with trembling hands, pen poised. Elaine ordered for everyone, correcting her pronunciation mid-sentence like a teacher with a favorite student. When the food arrived, halos of truffle and egg, Victor raised his glass. To family, he said, and progress. I raised my water. To both. No one noticed my hand didn't shake. Conversation moved to wedding plans. Venue, lighting, guests worth impressing. Sophia mentioned upgrading the house they'd just bought, her tone suggesting renovation was a moral act. Every so often, Evan looked at me, searching for approval he wasn't sure he wanted. I didn't give him any. When the check came, I slid my card across before Victor could reach for it. My treat, I said. He looked momentarily offended. Outside, the sunlight caught his Rolex, flaring gold. Evan and Sophia walked ahead, their laughter soft and rehearsed. I lingered on the sidewalk, tasting burnt coffee and lemon polish in the air. And that's when it hit me. The first crack wasn't in them. It was in my son. Summit Ridge Country Club smelled like lemon polish and ambition. Every surface glowed as if afraid of being ordinary. White napkins folded into swans sat on tasting tables, the chandeliers dripping like honeyed glass. I arrived 20 minutes early. Habit. The ballroom doors were half open, giving me a view of the tasting setup. Victor was already there, sleeves rolled just enough to suggest he didn't need to try. Elaine hovered by his side, notebook in hand like an executive assistant to her own ego. Halibut's better, Victor was saying. More modern. Sophia nodded. And photogenic. Salmon's too. Rustic. I smiled faintly. Photogenic halibut, Ruth would have snorted. Evan caught my eye from across the room. Dad, want a taste? I'll watch, I said. You go ahead. I wandered toward the corridor near the fitting room, admiring the framed photographs, ballroom weddings frozen in permanent happiness. A soft hum from the kitchen filled the hallway, broken by the faint sound of heels clicking. Then I heard it. Sophia's voice, light and careless. If he shows up in that jacket again, people will think we sponsor the local homeless. Elaine laughed quietly. We'll seat him near the kitchen. The air went still. One of the servers, a kid carrying a tray of glasses, stopped mid-step. Another, a woman with a name tag that read Maria, looked at me, then quickly away. Her lips parted like she wanted to say something but thought better of it. Evan stepped out from a side room, phone still in hand. He froze when he heard them. For half a second I thought he'd speak. Instead, he let the door swing shut behind him. Slow, deliberate. That silence told me everything. Outside, a siren wailed in the distance, the faint, wavering kind that dips low as it moves away. Ruth used to pause at that sound and whisper, "Someone's worst day." I breathed once, slow and steady. Anger came easy. But anger doesn't teach, it only burns. And I've seen enough fire to know when to hold the line. Victor called to the maitre d' champagne pairings. Sophia adjusted her reflection in a mirror. Elaine checked her Dior handbag. None of them noticed the smoke they'd just lit. I stepped forward and nodded to Maria. You've been here long? 3 years, she said softly. And him? I nodded at the young server, still frozen with his tray. Daniel, she whispered. I smiled. You both do good work, keep it up. Her eyes flickered with something respect, maybe pity. Hard to tell the difference these days. At the bar, Victor was lecturing the manager about table spacing. Evan stood nearby, staring at his phone like it might explain the man he was becoming. I thanked the maitre d' for his time, left a folded tip on the counter, and walked out without touching the food. The corridor lights hummed overhead. My reflection in the glass doors looked older than I remembered, but my shoulders were still square. The same jacket. The same man. When the elevator arrived, I stepped inside and turned back for one last glance at the ballroom. They were laughing again high, perfect laughter bouncing off the marble. By the time the elevator door closed on their laughter, I already knew 2 first names and the exact sentence that would echo later. La Scala Trattoria sat on the corner of Main and Fifth, the kind of restaurant that pretended it had history. Every wall was covered with sepia photos of people who had probably never eaten there, and the lighting was low enough to make everyone look like a better version of themselves. The back room had been reserved for family only. Victor made sure to emphasize that part when he'd sent the invitation. I arrived 5 minutes early, old habit. The hostess led me past rows of wine racks and whispered, "They're already inside." The room smelled like basil, old wood, and money. Chianti bottles lined the shelves like props. Victor stood at the head of the table, polishing the stem of his glass with a napkin, the way some people polish stories. Elaine arranged place cards as if the order itself could prevent chaos. Sophia laughed lightly at something Evan said, her hand resting on his forearm. "Walt," Victor greeted me, flashing a politician's smile. "Glad you made it. We were just about to toast." I nodded. "Wouldn't miss it." He lifted his glass. "To unity," he said, pausing for effect, "and tasteful optics." "Optics?" I asked, just to make him say it out loud. Sophia's smile tightened. "Dad just means the photos, the overall flow." Elaine's eyes darted to Evan. It was a cue. I saw it happen before he did. Evan started, clearing his throat. "About that..." My stomach went still. I'd been a firefighter long enough to recognize the exact second before a building gives. Evan swallowed. "Maybe Maybe you sit out the big photos, Dad. Just the family ones with, the bridal party. They're doing a certain look. There it was. Short, clumsy, but sharp enough to cut through the noise. The room froze. Forks hovered midair. Even the background music seemed to pull back. Victor smiled like a man teaching a lesson. Elaine patted Sophia's wrist as if calming a pet. Sophia didn't speak. She didn't have to. The message was already delivered. I took a slow sip of water. The glass didn't shake. "Understood," I said. The silence stretched too long. A waiter entered, balancing plates of bruschetta, and the moment broke like a cheap bulb. Conversation restarted in fragments: wine, travel, the color scheme of table linens. But the current underneath had changed. Evan avoided my eyes, pretending to check a text that wasn't there. Victor leaned back, satisfied. Elaine called the waiter, "Dear." Sophia reached for her phone again, as if documenting victory. I smiled once, small. "Good toast, Victor. Optics are important." He laughed, not hearing the echo. When dinner ended, they drifted toward the front to take the first round of photos. I stepped out the side door instead, into the alley. The air was cold, sharper than I expected. I loosened my tie and leaned against the brick wall. A light from the kitchen window flickered across the alley, catching steam from the exhaust vent. That's when I noticed it, a single loose brick halfway down the wall. Not missing, just shifted. I touched it with my thumb, and it moved easily. No resistance. For a moment I saw Evan at 8 years old, standing in our driveway with a Cub Scout badge clutched in his hand, asking me to pin it on. He wouldn't let go of my fingers afterward, held on too long, like he was afraid I'd forget him. I could still feel that small grip, and now I could feel its absence just as clearly. I pressed the brick again. It slid another inch. Inside, laughter echoed faintly, the sound of people toasting themselves. When the brick slid under my thumb, I stopped blaming the wall and started mapping the foundation. The kitchen was quiet, except for the ticking of the wall clock and the hum of the refrigerator. My Wall Street Journal lay folded neatly beside a stack of bills. The MacBook Air glowed on the table, the cursor blinking like it was waiting for a command. It was supposed to be a quick logistics call, final details before the wedding tomorrow. Nothing emotional, nothing dramatic, just timing and parking and guest flow. Evan's voice came first, half distracted, half son. "Dad, we're looping Mom in. She just wants to smooth out arrivals." Then Elaine's voice, syrupy and precise. "Walter, dear, just a quick note from the planner. It's simpler if you use the west entrance tomorrow. The staff will guide you." I glanced at the floor plan she'd emailed earlier. West entrance. I knew that door. It opened beside the dumpsters in the service hallway that smelled like bleach and wine corks. "That the one by the dumpsters?" I asked. Silence. Sophia's voice chimed in, brittle under its polish. "Please don't make this dramatic. It's just easier for flow. Guests, photographers, bridal party, it keeps things elegant." "Elegant," I repeated. "Got it." Evan coughed into the phone, the sound of someone trying to rewrite the moment while it's still happening. "Dad, it's not what it sounds like. Just easier for everyone, okay?" I could hear clinking glasses in the background, wine, laughter, a playlist of curated perfection. I imagined them sitting at that marble counter in Victor's kitchen, the kind that never gets used for actual cooking. "Copy that," I said. Then I reached for my Mont Blanc pen and clicked it shut. The sound landed like a gavel. Elaine exhaled through her nose, the way people do when they think they've resolved a conflict. "Wonderful. So we'll see you at 5? Sharp?" "You'll see me," I said. "Good night." When the call ended, the room returned to its stillness. I stared at the corner of the table where Ruth's recipe cards were stacked, yellowed, corners curled, written in her slanted cursive. One card sat on top. "Keep the list short, then keep it." I pulled my notebook closer and wrote 3 words. Point of no. Then I underlined return. The pen dug slightly into the paper. I felt it catch on the grain, leaving an impression even after the ink dried. For years, my life had been built on lists. Equipment checklists, emergency call logs, duty rosters. Lists saved lives because they didn't rely on emotion. They relied on precision. So I made another one. Chief Ramirez. Review weekend volunteer roster. Bank of America. confirm disbursement, hold authority. Gupta, Esquire, verify trust clause conditions. Club GM, courtesy call. 4 lines. Clean, contained. I typed a short message to Gupta. Need confirmation on conditional clauses before event date. Timing matters. Then I sat back and looked around my kitchen, the faded paint Ruth picked out, the faint smell of coffee grounds, the chair across from me still slightly turned the way she used to leave it. I closed the laptop. For a moment I prayed the only prayer that ever made sense to a firefighter. Keep them safe from themselves. Outside, the wind rattled the window pane. Somewhere in the distance, a siren began to wail, rising and falling like memory itself. I thought about all the times Ruth had paused, when she heard one and whispered, "Someone's worst day." Maybe this time it wasn't a siren. Maybe it was a signal. I turned off the kitchen light. The house sank into a calm that felt less like peace and more like readiness. Before their wine glasses clinked goodnight, the first email left my outbox. I guess 99% of you will hear this. Sigh and scroll past, not clicking like or subscribe, even if it only takes a second. What time is it for you? And where are you listening? Walt's office sat above the old equipment shop, a single room that still smelled faintly of coiled hose, burnt coffee, and dusted brass. The window unit hummed against the heat, its steady vibration mixing with the low creak of the ceiling fan. He didn't start with anger. He started with order. The MacBook Air blinked awake. He opened a clean document titled Incident Log Veil Event. The format looked familiar. Time, contact, action, initials, like any other report. First call, Chief Ramirez. Morning, Chief. Hey, Captain, you joining the fireworks detail Saturday? Negative. Pull our volunteer crew. We'll cover ambulances instead. A pause, then a low whistle. Understood. Appreciate it. Click. 1 line logged. Second call. Summit Ridge General Manager. The man answered mid-laughter, his voice echoing off marble. Mr. Brooks, big day tomorrow, huh? Afternoon. The Veterans Gala next quarter, it'll relocate. I'd like our donor plaque removed until further notice. Oh, I see. Any particular reason? Just realigning commitments. The silence that followed was polite. The kind that meant we both understand what this really is. I'll take care of it, the GM said softly. I know you will. Click. Logged. Third call. Local 112. A low rumble of voices answered laughter. Coffee mugs, somebody's radio in the background. Cap, that you? Yeah. Advise members. No off-books work for Vale Properties until back invoices are resolved. You got it. They still owe for the HVAC job, right? They do. Understood. Consider it done. Walt leaned back, rubbing the bridge of his nose. The hum of the window unit filled the pause. He remembered the weight of a rookie's arm around his shoulder years ago, half-conscious, blood trickling down his temple. The stairwell had been ready to give. All Walt had to do was not move the wrong way. He'd whispered then the same thing he whispered now. Step back. He took a sip of coffee, gone cold, and opened his email. To Bank of America Relationship Manager. Subject, temporary hold on. Brooks Family Event, Trust, Disbursement. Good morning. Please hold pending distribution from the Brooks Family Event Trust until the conduct clause is reviewed and confirmed by counsel. Cisse, Gupta, Esquire. Thank you, Walter Brooks. He reread it once. Steady, then hit send. Another entry in the log. 9:41 a.m. Trust hold initiated. By 10:15, his phone had already buzzed twice, missed calls from Evan. Walt ignored them, jotting his initials beside each completed action. He wasn't sabotaging anything. He was simply stepping away, removing the hand that had held up a structure that didn't deserve his balance anymore. On the far wall, framed commendations gathered dust. Beneath them, Ruth's photo, a candid one, taken at a station picnic. She was laughing mid-sentence, a paper plate in her hand. He looked at it and thought of gravity, the way it takes over when you stop fighting it. One by one, the gears turned. The gala's funding paused. The Vales' shell projects lost preferred vendor status. The ballroom discount vanished when the donor plaque came down. It wasn't sabotage. It was absence. At 11:58, he leaned back in his chair. His pen tapped the desk twice. The shop downstairs rumbled as one of the volunteers rolled a hose cart out. He checked his inbox. The trust hold confirmation had arrived. Distribution pending review per conduct clause. He signed the log. W. Brooks. The window unit buzzed harder as the afternoon heat pressed in. For the first time in days, he felt something like calm. By noon, I hadn't raised my voice once, and yet the room at Summit Ridge felt a shade dimmer already. The elevator groaned on its way up, a sound too human for a building this polished. Midtown Newark glass, chrome, and self-importance, stacked in 40 stories of law and logic. I watched the numbers climb and caught the hairline crack in the ceiling tile, imperfection in an expensive place. It comforted me. Gupta's office smelled like ink, citrus polish, and quiet power. The sirens below sounded distant, like a reminder that real emergencies still existed somewhere outside these walls. "Coffee?" he asked. "No thanks," I said, lowering myself into a leather chair cold enough to make me straighten my posture. He slid a stack of papers across the desk, thick, tabbed, stamped. "Trust 17B, your event support trust. Here's the non-disparagement clause." I flipped to the marked section. Funding is contingent upon respectful representation of donor and associated beneficiaries in public and private communications. "They signed?" I asked. He nodded. "Both of them. Here's the side letter." He placed another document on the table, shorter, handwritten in parts, Ruth's kind of paper. It outlined 20 volunteer hours at the Veterans Center before final release of the funds. "They never showed," I said quietly. "No, sir." On the laptop beside him, an email thread from Bank of America glowed in pale blue. "Pending distribution. $186,400 venue, catering, photography." Gupta tapped the screen with his pen. "You may authorize partial release for non-refundable vendor deposits. The remainder can be frozen pending compliance." I uncapped my Mont Blanc, the weight of it familiar, grounding. "Release deposits only. Freeze balance." He nodded, typing swiftly. "Done." Across town, I imagined Victor's phone lighting up as the alert hit his inbox. He'd call in minutes. Right on cue, Gupta's line blinked. "Mr. Vale," he said smoothly. "Yes, I'm aware. It's your signature, sir." A pause, then quieter, colder. "Then perhaps you should have read the conditions." He hung up and gave me a small smile, the kind lawyers reserve for men who understand restraint. We went through the schedule line by line. Vendor deposits confirmed. Final payouts paused. The conduct clause cited. Paperwork notarized. The copier hummed in the corner, feeding out duplicates with the calm rhythm of inevitability. When it was done, Gupta slid the last page forward. "Sign here. You're protected. Clean execution." I signed, each stroke deliberate. My handwriting had steadied since the department days back then. Adrenaline made the letters lean forward. Now they stood upright, balanced. As I capped the pen, I thought of Ruth's grocery lists, her cursive, neat boxes squared, each item checked twice. She used to say, "A list saves us money." I smiled. A list, it turned out, could save a son too. Gupta stacked the papers neatly, aligning edges with surgical precision. "You've exercised restraint, Mr. Brooks. That's rare in these cases. Oh, firefighters learn to pull oxygen, not pour gasoline," I said. He chuckled. "Then consider this containment achieved." We shook hands. His were dry and warm, confident. I stepped back into the elevator, holding the copy folder under my arm. The hum of the city rose around me again, honking, wind, and the faint rhythm of rain tapping on glass. When the doors opened to Market Street, the air hit me clean and damp, the scent of rain and solvency. I looked up at the skyline, half silver, half storm, and thought, they'll learn soon enough that every contract tells a story. By the time I stepped back onto Market Street, the wind smelled like rain and solvency. It started with a single post. Maria, the server from Summit Ridge, wrote it late Wednesday night. Just one sentence on Facebook, nothing tagged, nothing named. "Imagine calling a retired fire captain homeless in front of staff. Couldn't be me." She added a heart emoji. That was all it took. By morning, screenshots were everywhere. Someone dropped it into the neighborhood watch group, the same place people usually complained about raccoons or speeding teenagers. The post blew past the moderator's polite reminder to Keep things positive. Within an hour, 20 comments stacked up. Wait, that's about the veils, right? One woman asked. Yeah, my sister caters for them, another replied. Heard there's drama at the club. A retired paramedic wrote. Captain Brooks saved my brother in '06. Man deserves respect. 10 firefighter spouses added heart emojis. The moderator posted again. Let's please remain civil. No one did. Phones lit up like sirens. Screenshots of the comments slid through text threads faster than anyone could delete them. By lunchtime, the club's private message inbox was full. Vendors began calling each other quietly. You taking the veil job? One asked. Only for deposits, came the answer. Balance due on delivery. Local 112 posted on its members' bulletin. Until back invoices are cleared, members are advised to decline off-books veil properties work. It wasn't vindictive, it was procedural, the way firehouses talk about fairness when no one's watching. The chandeliers at Summit Ridge threw coins of light across the ballroom floor. Every reflection practiced, rehearsed, perfect. Tables gleamed under white linen and crystal. The air smelled faintly of lavender, but not Ruth's kind. Hers had been cheap and human. This was expensive and hollow. I arrived on time, wearing the same dark jacket that had survived 3 firehouse Christmases and 1 retirement ceremony. A junior coordinator in a headset intercepted me at the door. Mr. Brooks, the family asked if you could enter through the West Hall. It's, smoother for photos. I smiled. The one by the dumpsters? Her mouth opened, then closed. Sir, It's all right, I said, stepping past her. I'll find my seat. The ballroom hush parted as I entered. People smiled with the strained politeness reserved for distant relatives who might not know the dress code. The band played something light harp strings, champagne bubbles. Victor stood near the stage, his Rolex catching the light like a taunt. Elaine lingered by the cake, her pearls glowing under the soft blue LEDs. Sophia turned when she saw me. The gown was perfect, every thread calculated for photographs. Her expression, too, was immaculate. Didn't security keep the local bum outside? She said under her breath, but not low enough. A ripple of laughter followed, small, sharp, designed to wound without leaving fingerprints. Evan started to speak. Sophia, but then he stopped, looked at his shoes. I felt the old stillness return, the kind that lives in your bones after years of smoke and alarms. It isn't anger, it's control. I looked toward the doorway. Maria stood there, half hidden behind a column, eyes wide. When she met my gaze, she gave a single nod. I walked to the stage. The band faltered. Victor's smile thinned. Excuse me, I said, voice level. Just 1 minute. The general manager hesitated, then nodded. His staff had seen enough in the past week to know who actually paid the bills. I took the microphone. My palm didn't tremble. My name is Captain Walter Brooks, retired. Father of the groom. Oh? The band's lights dimmed behind me, and the silence was the kind that presses on your ribs. The trust that paid for this event, this room, this food, these flowers, includes a conduct clause. A simple one. Someone near the bar shifted. The sound of fabric brushing linen. It says that funding continues only if all named parties conduct themselves with respect toward the donor. That condition, I said, looking directly at Sophia, has been violated. I paused. The room tilted toward me, as if the chandeliers leaned in to listen. So, every unpaid dollar you're expecting from the caterers to the venue balance is being clawed back right now. No one moved. Then the color drained from Victor's face. He lunged for his phone, muttering, "Call Gupta now!" Elaine's hand flew to her throat. The band froze mid-riff. Someone whispered, "Boa?" Like it was a person who might appear and explain this away. I could hear the faintest click from the speakers as the microphone settled back into silence. I handed it to the GM. "Thank you for your professionalism," I said quietly. He nodded once, throat tight. As I stepped off the stage, I passed Evan. His mouth opened, but no words came out. The world he'd chosen was collapsing in slow motion around him, chandeliers still glittering as though nothing had changed. I didn't look back. Outside the ballroom, the air felt clean, almost cold. I could smell rain again. Ruth was with me then, not pushing, just there. A hand between my shoulder blades. I left the stage to the sound of nothing at all, the kind of nothing you hear right before a house chooses whether to stand or fall. The smell of burnt toast filled the kitchen. Morning light slid across the counter, catching on the rim of my Omega watch. The house was quiet, too quiet for what I knew was happening out there. The first buzz came from my phone, then another. By the third, I stopped pretending not to check. News alert. Wedding funding withdrawn amid conduct dispute at Summit Ridge. Below it, a photo of the ballroom, Sophia's perfect smile frozen mid-glare, Victor mid-sentence, microphones and flashbulbs catching the moment that was never supposed to exist. I turned the burner off and poured coffee into my chipped station mug. The phone rang again. This time I answered. "Dad?" Evan's voice cracked through static. "Everything's frozen. Bank of America says, what's this? Conduct clause breach? They're locking the event account, the trust, even the vendor reimbursements. You didn't have to do this." "Didn't I?" I said. There was a pause. The kind you hear when someone realizes the echo they're arguing with is truth. Sophia's voice bled faintly through the speaker. "He's bluffing. My father will fix it." Then, further off, Victor's baritone. "It's our money." Another voice cut in, measured, unshaken, Gupta. "It was your son's father's. There's a difference." The line went dead. Outside, the neighborhood was waking. I could hear a leaf blower, the distant bark of a dog, the sound of someone's sprinkler rotating too far onto the sidewalk. Life continuing, uninterested. My inbox was a steady drumbeat of updates. Vendors forwarding contract inquiries. The club GM politely confirming that payment responsibility had shifted. Per revised agreements, final invoices are now addressed to Mr. and Mrs. Vale directly. Across town, Victor was probably on his second espresso and third tantrum. Elaine, I imagined, already drafting a statement about misunderstandings. Sophia Googling, "Can a trust revoke after disbursement?" and refreshing her inbox every minute. And Evan, my son, he'd be staring at his reflection, seeing himself somewhere between two men, one who had earned respect and one who borrowed it. I sat at the table and traced the coffee ring from the mug Ruth used to call the lucky one. The crack near the handle had deepened, but it still held. When Ruth was dying, she'd gripped my hand hard enough to leave half-moons on my skin. "Don't ever let them rewrite who you are," she'd said. I hadn't understood then that sometimes that meant standing still while everyone else collapses under the weight of their own choices. The phone buzzed again, Evan, then Sophia, then an unknown number. I let them all pass. I opened the shop for a bit, wiped the counter, oiled the hinge on the back door. The quiet of routine steadied me. A few regulars waved through the window, their eyes full of questions they wouldn't ask out loud. At 10:07, another notification flashed. Local 112 statement. All Vale projects on hold pending resolution of accounts. By 10:09, someone had posted it in the Neighborhood Watch group with a single caption. "Actions have consequences." I chuckled once, quietly. Not pride, just the strange symmetry of it all. The phone buzzed again. "Evan, one more time," I answered. "Dad," he whispered. "People are calling. The vendors, the press. What do I say?" "Tell the truth," I said. He didn't answer. Outside, the sky had turned that pale, washed-out blue that always followed a long night of storm. I rinsed the mug, set it upside down on the rack, and looked at the clock. 11:52. By noon, their lawyer wanted a meeting. By dusk, the entire town already had one in their heads. 2 days later, the Summit Ridge Country Club looked less like a wedding venue and more like a courthouse. News vans lined the front lot, their antennas stabbing at the sky. Reporters clustered near the fountain, microphones raised like weapons polished with politeness. Inside, staff whispered, phones filmed, and somewhere in the chaos, Victor Vale was shouting about, "Spin!" I parked across the street at the hardware store and walked the rest of the way. The air smelled like rain on asphalt and camera cables warming in the Sunday. "Captain Brooks," someone called. "Channel 7. Did you intend to humiliate your son's in-laws?" I kept walking. Then I stopped, turned just enough. "No," I said. "I intended to remind them where money comes from." That answer hung in the air for a second. Somewhere behind me, a veteran muttered, "Damn right." Another man clapped once, short and sharp, like punctuation. From the corner of my eye, I saw Sophia step out of a black sedan, sunglasses too large for her face, makeup perfect but trembling. Elaine followed close, whispering to a reporter. "This has all been taken out of context." A mother nearby bent to her child and said quietly, "That's the one who mocked the fireman." I didn't turn. By the entrance, a group of veterans had gathered men I'd worked beside, men whose names I knew from fundraisers, memorial plaques, car washes. They weren't loud, they just stood there. Their silence spoke louder than any headline. One of them, Pete Ramirez, called out, "You saved my nephew on 78 back in '09. Don't remember? Kid had half a steering column through his leg." I nodded. "He made it." "He did," Pete said. "Runs marathons now." "Oh." A younger man next to him lifted his phone and whispered, "We got your back, Cap." It spread like that, one post at a time, one story after another. Local 112's Facebook page shared a photo of the old firehouse with a caption, "Respect is currency. Some folks overdrafted." Within an hour, the club's management issued a statement. Summit Ridge upholds community values and expresses regret for any disrespect shown toward local heroes. It wasn't much, but it was more than an apology, it was a shift. The same people who had once nodded to Victor Vale now avoided him in the parking lot. By noon, a food truck parked outside the gates handing out free coffee to veterans. Someone taped a handwritten sign to the counter, "Thank you, Captain Brooks." Meanwhile, Sophia's last Instagram post, a carousel from the wedding captioned, "A night of pure love and legacy," vanished. Comment sections had turned toxic. Words like shame, entitled, and karma replaced the hearts and congratulations. Evan wasn't seen that day. The reporters asked if I'd speak for him. I said no. Inside, the club lights burned bright for no one. Tables still smelled faintly of lilies. The cake had been boxed up and donated. Someone shoved a microphone toward me again. "Captain Brooks, do you think this public reaction is fair?" I looked at the crowd, neighbors, co-workers, strangers each holding up phones, recording not spectacle but something closer to belief. "I think fairness," I said slowly, "is finally catching up." They didn't cheer. They just nodded. A woman from the bakery I'd supported during the pandemic called out, "My husband says you're a good man. You fed the crew when our oven broke." I didn't remember, but I smiled anyway. Glad it helped. Behind me, Victor cursed into his phone, trying to reach someone at Bank of America. No one was answering. As I walked back toward my truck, the sky shifted clearer now, the storm finally passing. My reflection caught on the windshield. Older, lined, but steady. For the first time in years, the town wasn't looking past me. They were looking with me. By evening, they weren't asking whether I was cruel, they were asking why the young forgot respect. The knock came just after 9. 3 short raps, the kind people make when they're not sure they're welcome. I didn't rush to answer. The coffee maker hissed, the clock ticked, and the faint smell of Ruth's lavender cleaner still lingered from my morning habit of wiping the counter the way she used to. When I finally opened the door, Evan stood there, tie gone, collar open, face pale from a night without sleep. "Can I come in?" he asked. "You're already halfway there," I said. He stepped inside and looked around like the house might accuse him. His eyes landed on the framed photo of Ruth by the window, then moved away. "I didn't know where else to go," he said. "You picked the right direction," I answered. We sat at the kitchen table, the same one where he used to build Lego fire trucks while I filled out shift reports. The silence stretched between us until it became its own sound. He broke first. "You made me look like a fool." "Oh." I looked at him over the rim of my mug. "No, you did that when you forgot who you were." His jaw tightened. "You could have pulled me aside." "Not," he gestured vaguely, meaning the ballroom, the cameras, the crowd. "Not like that." I took a slow breath. "Would you have listened?" He opened his mouth, closed it, then slammed his palm on the counter. The coffee mug rattled but didn't fall. "Do you have any idea what you've done to my life?" he said. "Evan," I said quietly, "I spent most of my life running into burning buildings. I know exactly what collapse looks like. You just built yours with better lighting." The fridge hummed behind us. Outside, a car door slammed, a dog barked, the normal rhythm of a neighborhood that had already judged and moved on. Finally, he asked, "So what happens now? You gonna keep freezing accounts, talking to lawyers, making me your lesson?" I leaned back, studying him. He looked smaller somehow, not by height, but by weight. The kind of shrinking that comes from truth pressing down. "You came to ask what happens next?" I said. He nodded, his voice barely there. Yeah. I set the mug down, steady. You rebuild. He blinked. That's it? That's everything. He ran both hands through his hair, frustrated. You think that fixes it? No, I said, but it starts it. Silence again. The kind that fills a room like smoke, visible only when it's too thick to breathe. He stared at the table, then finally said, Sophia, she's gone. Took her stuff this morning. I didn't react. Some fires you don't douse. You just let them burn out. She said I was weak, he added. I met his eyes. Then prove her wrong. For the first time, something shifted in him, a tiny flicker, almost shame, almost resolve. He stood, hesitated. Dad, were you ever going to tell me about the clause? I did, I said. You just didn't read the fine print. He almost smiled. Almost. Then he nodded once and headed for the door. I watched him go, hands shoved in his pockets, shoulders heavy. When he opened the door, the morning light spilled across the floor, the same light that had once bounced off his Cub Scout badge the day I taught him how to salute. His arm had been steady then, proud. I remembered holding him during that fire alarm test years ago, both of us calm while the siren screamed. He left the door open when he went out, and for the first time, I didn't close it behind him. The veterans' center smelled like coffee, disinfectant, and something older wood polish and dust that had soaked into the floorboards decades ago. Evan stood in the doorway, shifting his weight like a man who'd shown up to the wrong address. His tie was gone, sleeves rolled, eyes tired. On the wall behind the front desk hung a faded group photo. 20 men in fire jackets, arms crossed, proud in the way only people who've earned exhaustion can be. The receptionist looked him over. You're the Brooks boy? He nodded. Evan. She smiled, polite but cautious. They're in the back hall. You can start with the mop. He hesitated just long enough for the words to sting. Down the corridor, voices echoed gravelly laughter, the scrape of chairs. A group of old firefighters sat around a folding table, sorting donated tools. One of them looked up as Evan passed. You the one marrying the socialite? The man said, half joking. Evan stopped, swallowed. Was? He said. Just here to help. The old man grinned. Good answer, mops by the sink. The bucket sloshed as he pushed it down the hallway. Each drag of the mop left a clean path through the grime, the sound rhythmic, almost soothing. Sweat gathered at his temples. No one cheered, no one mocked. They just watched him work, curious, waiting to see if this was a gesture or a beginning. By the second hour, the bucket had gone murky. His shoulders ached. His phone buzzed twice. He didn't check it. Somewhere outside, a siren wailed faintly, then faded. At lunch, he sat on the curb outside the center, unwrapping a sandwich from wax paper. Across the street, he saw the sign for the Brooks Memorial Playground, the one the community had renamed after his mother passed, the same playground his father had helped build. He ate quietly, the bread dry in his mouth, but something steadier began to settle inside him. When he returned, one of the men pointed toward the restroom sink. Leaking again, been dripping since Easter. Think you can handle a wrench? Evan knelt beneath the counter. The metal smelled faintly of rust and lemon soap. He loosened the fittings, remembering how his father used to crouch under the kitchen sink with him watching. Righty-tighty, lefty-loosey, son. Don't force it, feel it breathe first. He tightened the joint, turned the valve. The drip stopped. The old man leaned over his shoulder, testing the faucet. Well, I'll be damned. Apple didn't fall far after all. Evan almost smiled. Almost. By late afternoon, he'd mopped every hallway, scrubbed 2 restrooms, and organized a shelf of donated supplies. His hands were raw, knuckles reddened. But when one of the veterans handed him a cold bottle of water, he felt a small flicker of something he hadn't felt in weeks' worth. Out in the parking lot, Walt watched through the window of his truck, engine idling. He'd parked a block away, out of sight. Through the glass, he could see Evan straightening from the sink, rolling his shoulders, wiping sweat from his brow. For a moment, Walt saw not the grown man, but the boy holding a flashlight while he fixed a busted pipe at home. Evan's fingers smudged with dirt, eyes wide, proud to help. Walt smiled once, just once, and turned the key. Inside, Evan hung the mop back in its place, then stood at the door, looking out at the late afternoon sun spreading gold across the pavement. When he straightened his back, The sunlight caught on his badge, the same one I'd saved from the ashes years ago. It started like a rumor and ended like a reckoning. By Monday morning, every local outlet carried the same headline: Vale Properties under investigation for disclosure fraud. What began as a wedding scandal had turned into a full-blown collapse. News montage. Channel 5. Multiple vendors allege unpaid balances after the revocation of the Brooks Event Trust. Channel set. State auditors confirm irregularities in Vale development contracts, unreported donations, falsified statements. Local 112 Bulletin. Contractors advised to suspend all projects until invoices cleared. The soundbites played like a requiem. Victor stood outside his glass office tower. Cameras flashing, tie askew, voice breaking. "We're victims of slander," he shouted, eyes darting like a cornered man. A reporter shot back. "Or accountability." The clip went viral before noon. By evening, Elaine Vale was on live television, dabbing her eyes with a tissue the size of a napkin. "We've been misunderstood," she said, trembling just enough to suggest innocence. The anchor didn't interrupt her. He didn't have to. The split screen already showed the headline: Civil suit filed Vale Properties accused of concealing liabilities. Behind the scenes, Sophia's influencer empire cracked. Sponsors quietly withdrew. Her brand accounts went silent. Then her personal page disappeared altogether. One gossip blog caught her in a grainy photo, outside a pawn boutique on Park Avenue, handing over a small Tiffany bag. The caption read, "Crisis chic?" The comment section was merciless. Evan watched the news from a diner off Route 22, alone in a booth meant for two. A mug of coffee sat untouched in front of him, milk congealing at the edges. The TV over the counter replayed Victor's press conference on loop. The closed captions flickered. "We're victims, victims, victims." Evan stirred the coffee absently, not for the taste but the motion. The spoon tapped the cup, rhythmic and hollow. He wasn't angry anymore, just tired. The kind of tired that doesn't ask for forgiveness, only silence. The waitress refilled his cup without asking. "Rough day?" He managed a faint smile. "Long month." "Oh." Outside, the rain came down in thin, precise lines, the kind that cleans instead of floods. Across town, I sat in my office above the shop, the same one that still smelled faintly of brass and smoke. The TV murmured in the background, reporting every downfall in slow motion. Civil suit expands to include Vale board members. Securities Bureau subpoenas. Internal communications. Vale family assets under review. I muted the sound. It wasn't joy I felt. It wasn't vengeance. It was gravity finally doing what it always does. On my desk sat an old ledger, edges charred from the warehouse fire years ago. I'd kept it as a reminder. Even paper can survive flame. So can truth. I ran my hand across its warped cover and thought of Ruth, how she used to say, "The world keeps score, Walt. You just have to wait long enough for the math to catch up." Evan's text came late that night. I heard, "Are you okay?" I typed back, "Always was." "You?" He didn't reply. He didn't have to. I knew where he'd be tomorrow morning back at the Veterans Center, mopping floors, repairing sinks, earning something money couldn't buy. On my phone, Sophia's name still sat in the contact list. Grayed out. I hovered a moment, then pressed delete. No malice, just closure. The rain eased. The city lights shimmered like they were learning to breathe again. By the time the Vales went dark online, Evan had turned the lights back on at the center. The training yard still smelled the same smoke, rust, and yesterday's sweat baked into the concrete. It had been years since I'd stood there in turnout boots, but the air hit my lungs like an old handshake. Chief Ramirez waved when he saw me. "Didn't think I'd see another Brooks on the roster," he said. I nodded toward Evan, who stood a few yards back, tugging at the stiff collar of his borrowed gear. He signed up for the weekend drill. Thought it'd do him good. Ramirez smirked. "You sure this is about him, Walt?" "Guess we'll find out," I said. They started with the hose line, 100 feet of canvas and brass that doesn't forgive sloppy form. Evan crouched beside the rig, gloves trembling slightly as he waited for the command. "Line to the tower," Ramirez barked. Evan heaved, dragging the weight across the gravel. The hose writhed like a live thing, fighting him every inch. The nozzle clanged against his shin. His footing slipped. I wanted to shout instruction, elbows tight, back straight, but I held my tongue. Some lessons don't stick unless they're earned in sweat. Halfway there, his knees buckled. The line sagged, water pulsing through it like a heartbeat. Ramirez called out, "You can tap out if you need to, son." Evan looked up, face streaked with soot. "No, sir." I stepped forward, just enough for him to hear. "Breathe. Reset." He nodded, jaw clenched. He exhaled once, repositioned, and hauled again. The sound changed, less strain, more rhythm. The crowd of volunteers quieted. Even the hiss of the pump softened under the weight of effort. When he reached the tower base, he collapsed to one knee, chest heaving. Ramirez strode over, checked the line, then clapped his shoulder. "Brooks' blood still runs hot," he said. A ripple of laughter moved through the crew, not mockery acknowledgement. Evan managed a grin through the sweat. The next drill was the carry test, hauling a 150-pound dummy across 20 yards. Evan hesitated, then bent, gripped the straps, and lifted. His back straightened, muscles trembling. But he didn't drop it. Each step was deliberate. By the time he crossed the line, his arms were shaking. The others gave a small cheer, the kind reserved for people who've failed before and come back anyway. Ramirez blew the whistle. "Drill complete!" The yard emptied slowly, gear clanging, laughter echoing. Evan pulled off his gloves, hands red and raw. He looked at me, unsure whether to speak. "Not bad," I said. He laughed once, low and tired. "You didn't say that when I graduated college." "College never made you carry anyone out of a fire," I said. We sat on the tailgate of my truck, drinking from the same jug of water. Silence thick, but not heavy. He turned the bottle in his hands. "You ever get scared in there? Real fire?" "Every time," I said. "The trick's not getting rid of fear, it's learning which direction to walk through it." He nodded slowly, eyes distant. "Guess I'm still learning." "That's the point," I said. The sun dipped low, turning the training tower gold. I watched him studying his gloves, his shoulders relaxed for the first time in months. When he lifted the hose again for one last practice run, I realized it wasn't my legacy he carried, it was his own. The firehouse mess hall hadn't changed much in 30 years. Same tin ceiling, same scarred tables, same faint smell of smoke that no cleaning product could ever erase. But tonight, there were candles in mason jars, folded paper napkins, a borrowed Bluetooth speaker playing old Springsteen low enough that conversation could live over it. Evan had done this. Not the event planner, not a sponsor. My son. He stood by the counter, sleeves rolled, flipping burgers on a griddle that had seen more Sunday breakfast than I could count. The rest of the crew, old hands and new faces alike, sat at the long tables, laughter bouncing off the walls like a call we'd all been waiting for. Chief Ramirez nudged me. "You gonna say anything, Walt?" I shook my head. "Not tonight. He's the one rebuilding." When everyone had eaten, Evan wiped his hands on a towel, cleared his throat, and picked up a chipped coffee mug. Can I get your attention for a second?" he said. The chatter softened. Even the coffee pot hissed as if it knew better than to interrupt. He glanced at me, then down at the floor, steadying himself. "Dad once said service isn't sacrifice, it's structure. You build, you hold, you hand it off. I forgot that for a while." The room went still. Every face turned toward him. "I thought legacy was something you inherited," he continued, voice low but clear. "Turns out it's something you earn by showing up on time, with both hands. So, thanks, Dad, for never shutting the door, even when I deserved it." He raised the mug. "To those who build, to those who hold." The applause wasn't loud, it was heavy, solid, like boots on concrete. I looked down, not because I was ashamed, but because that's how men like us handle grace. Quietly. When the room settled, I said just enough. "You're home, son." No speech, no sermon, just that. The laughter that followed wasn't polished like at the club, it was raw, real, full of stories being passed around like dessert. Someone spilled coffee. Someone else joked about the old siren still waking the neighborhood. A kid from the new volunteer crew asked if the griddle ever got cleaned properly. Ramirez told him to wash his mouth out with soap. Somewhere in the noise, I heard Ruth's laugh, soft, far away, but unmistakable. She used to say the same thing after long days when the house was a mess, but everyone was fed. "You did your job, Walt. That's enough." Across the table, Evan was talking to Maria, the same server who'd posted that first Facebook comment months ago. She laughed at something he said, and for the first time he didn't look like a man carrying shame. He looked like a man building again. When the plates were cleared and the lights dimmed, Evan came over, towel still slung over his shoulder. "We'll do it again next month," he said. "Monthly dinners?" I asked. "Community nights," he said. "Veterans, families, rookies. Bring whoever needs a seat." I nodded. "You're on to something." He smiled. "Guess I learned from the best." I wanted to tell him that wasn't true, that he'd learned from the worst of me too. But I let it rest. As I helped stack the chairs, I looked around the hall one last time, the grease stain on the tablecloth, the flickering candles, the lingering warmth that didn't come from the stove. When the laughter died down, I thought maybe the fire was finally out. But Ruth always said, "Embers tell the truth last." I guess 99% of you will hear this. Sigh and scroll past, not clicking like or subscribe. Even if it only takes a second, what time is it for you, and where are you listening? Gupta's office looked exactly as it had months ago, same marble floors, same leather chairs, same faint scent of printer toner that never quite left. But this time there was no tension in the air, only quiet purpose. He looked up from the document. "So you're adding him back in?" I shook my head. "No, I'm adding him forward." He leaned back, the hint of a smile ghosting across his face. "That's not legal language, Captain, but it's good language." I uncapped my Mont Blanc, same one I'd used for the first draft of the trust, back when the air between my son and me could have lit its own fire and signed the amendment. The paper whispered under my pen, the last act in a long ledger of lessons. Gupta slid the document into a folder labeled Brooks Legacy Revision, 17C. "Half to the Ruth Brooks Community Fund," he confirmed. "The rest conditional?" I nodded. "Yes, to Evan, contingent on one line." He adjusted his glasses, reading it aloud. "Maintain the flame." He looked up. "Pudic." "Practical," I said. "It's what she always said. You don't pass fire, you teach tending." He signed his witness line and stood. "It's a good clause. Keeps the story clean." When I stepped outside, the rain had started thin, steady, soaking through my jacket collar. Evan stood by the curb, holding 2 paper cups from Starbucks. "Pike Place." My order. His hands trembled, maybe from the cold, maybe not. "I figured you'd be here a while," he said, "extra half and half." I took the cup. The warmth hit my palm harder than I expected. "You waited." He shrugged. "Didn't seem right to leave." We stood there a moment, steam rising between us like breath made visible. The traffic light blinked red to green, then back again. He finally said, "Chief Ramirez told me about the fund. Mom would have liked that." "She would have," I said. He sipped his coffee, then looked at me. "So, the flame stays lit? As long as you tend it." The answer landed between us, not command, not permission, just truth. He nodded, eyes bright from something that wasn't rain. For the first time in a long time, I saw not the boy who had failed, nor the man who had betrayed, but the one Ruth always swore he'd become. We started walking, one umbrella, shared. The city's neon signs reflected off puddles like broken constellations, and for once the silence wasn't heavy. I thought of Ruth the way she'd hold my wrist when I wrote, saying, "Leave space for grace, Walt." Maybe this was that space. Behind us, Gupta's office light flicked off, and the glass door shut with a clean click final, not cold. Evan spoke once more softly. "Dad, thank you for not giving up." I looked ahead, the rain thinning to a mist. "I almost did. But the flame's stubborn like that." He laughed quietly, and I felt something inside me settle, the sound of a storm ending, not in thunder but in understanding. We reached the truck. He opened the passenger door this time. I let him. When we drove off, the city looked washed new. Legacy isn't what survives you. It's what behaves when you're gone.